Mind control in gaming is no longer a fantasy, but a reality of our days. Today, we stand on the threshold of a new era of interaction with the digital world, where traditional controllers give way to the power of human thought. Neuro interfaces, devices that read the brain's electrical activity and convert it into commands for a computer, are rapidly moving from laboratories into the everyday lives of gamers. Companies like Neurable and Control Labs have already released the first commercial solutions that allow controlling a character in a game without a single movement. Simple electroencephalographic headsets can recognize basic commands, while more advanced systems capture the subtlest nuances of mental imagery. Elon Musk's tech giant Neuralink, although focusing on medical applications, is laying the groundwork for future entertainment neuro interfaces with unprecedented precision. These devices don't just change the way we play, they transform the very concept of the gaming experience, blurring the line between intention and action, between thought and its digital embodiment. The history of game controllers is a journey from simple to complex, from tangible to invisible. In the 70s of the last century, the first arcade machines offered players the simplest joysticks and buttons. Then came home consoles with wired controllers, which over time grew additional features: analog sticks, triggers, motion sensors. The 80s and 90s were marked by experiments with form, light guns, steering wheels, dance pads. The industry was looking for new ways to immerse players in virtual worlds. The 2000s brought the revolution of wireless technologies and motion-sensing controllers, like the Nintendo Wii Remote or PlayStation Move. But the real breakthrough came when researchers turned their attention to the electrical activity of the brain. The first medical electroencephalographs appeared back in the 20s of the 20th century. But it was only in the early 2000s that the technology became compact and affordable enough for commercial use. In 2007, NeuroSky introduced the first consumer EEG headset, and in 2009, Emotive released a more advanced system with 14 electrodes. Modern neuro interfaces use several approaches. Non-invasive systems read signals from the surface of the head. Semi-invasive ones are placed on the surface of the brain, and invasive ones are directly inside the nervous tissue. For games, primarily non-invasive technologies are currently used, which recognize patterns of brain activity and convert them into commands. The accuracy of such systems is constantly growing, and machine learning algorithms allow the interface to be adapted to a specific user. Our brain is an amazing organ, capable of reconfiguring itself for new tasks. This property, known as neuroplasticity, underlies our ability to adapt to game neuro interfaces. When we begin to control a game with the power of thought, the brain forms entirely new neural connections that did not exist before. Research by neurobiologists from Stanford University shows that regular use of neuro interfaces leads to the strengthening of synaptic connections in the motor cortex and prefrontal areas. The brain literally reconfigures itself to interact more effectively with the digital environment. In the first weeks of using a neuro interface, users note the need for high concentration, but gradually control becomes intuitive, almost unconscious. This happens because the neural circuits responsible for mental commands become more efficient. Prolonged immersion in virtual worlds through neuro interfaces can significantly alter the perception of reality. Neuroimaging studies have revealed that in experienced neurogame users, activity in brain areas responsible for distinguishing between real and imaginary decreases. The boundary between the physical and the virtual blurs at the neural level. This is particularly evident in the phenomenon of digital echo, when players try to use mental commands to control objects in the real world. Scientists from the Tokyo Institute of Technology have found that intensive use of neurointerfaces leads to a redistribution of gray matter in the brain. Areas responsible for imagination and abstract thinking increase in volume, while zones associated with tactile perception may decrease. This is an adaptive mechanism, but it raises questions about the long-term consequences of such reorganization. Who is at the highest risk of developing neurogame addiction? Research shows that adolescents aged 12 to 17 constitute the most vulnerable group. This is due to the peculiarities of their brain development. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for self-control and decision-making, is not yet fully formed, while the limbic system, responsible for emotions and pleasure, is operating at full capacity. Neurophysiologists at the University of California found that the adolescent brain is particularly susceptible to dopamine surges, which are 10 times more intense when using neurointerfaces compared to traditional games. Young adults aged 18 to 25 are also at increased risk, as their neural connections are still actively forming. Interestingly, individuals with certain psychological profiles are more prone to developing neurogame addiction. Researchers identify several key risk factors: a tendency to avoid problems, low self-esteem, social anxiety, and a search for thrills. Social factors also play an important role. Loneliness, lack of support, family conflicts, or traumatic experiences can push a person to seek solace in virtual worlds, where the neurointerface creates the illusion of complete control and acceptance. Children from families where parents themselves are overly engrossed in technology and do not model a healthy digital balance are particularly vulnerable. Psychologists note a paradoxical trend. Those who struggle with concentration in real life often demonstrate an astonishing ability to focus when using neurointerfaces, which makes this technology particularly attractive to people with ADHD and similar disorders. The gender factor in the development of neurogame addiction manifests quite ambiguously. Recent studies by the Institute of Neurosciences in San Diego have revealed an interesting pattern. Men and women exhibit different patterns of addictive behavior when using gaming neural interfaces. Statistics show that 65% of neurogame addicts are men, yet the rate of addiction growth among women increases 20% faster annually. Neurobiological analysis points to fundamental differences. In men, the reward system is more active when achieving specific goals and competitive successes, while in women, brain areas associated with social interaction and emotional experience react more strongly. This explains why men are more often addicted to neurogames with pronounced competitive mechanics, and women to immersive social simulations. Clinical cases from the practice of the Tokyo Digital Detoxification Center demonstrate that women are better at recognizing developing addiction and seek help earlier, but experience a more intense withdrawal syndrome on an emotional level. Sociocultural factors also play a significant role. Societal pressure and stereotypes about gamers as a predominantly male audience lead to female addiction often remaining unnoticed or being masked as other psychological problems. This creates a dangerous, invisible epidemic effect among the female audience, especially in the age group of 17 to 23 years. Traditional video games have been perfecting player retention methods for decades. Classic addiction mechanics are based on a deep understanding of human psychology and work flawlessly, even without a direct connection to the brain. At the core of these systems is the principle of variable reinforcement, the same mechanism that makes gambling so addictive. The player never knows exactly when they will receive a reward, but the anticipation creates constant tension and dopamine rushes. Developers of traditional games masterfully implement progression systems, where each achievement opens the way to new opportunities. Levels, skills, equipment, all this forms an endless ladder of goals that the player is ready to climb for hours. Social mechanics play a special role. Leaderboards, guilds, cooperative raids. The human brain is evolutionarily tuned to social recognition, and traditional games skillfully exploit this need. The psychological principle of invested effort is also critically important. The more time a player invests in a game, the harder it is for them to detach from it. This is the classic sunk cost fallacy, where we don't want to admit that the time spent was wasted. Systems of daily quests and temporary events form the habit of regularly returning to the game, creating a sustainable gaming ritual. Many successful projects use the principle of artificial scarcity, limiting access to certain content, which increases its subjective value. Microtransactions and loot boxes add an element of gambling, engaging the same neural pathways as classic slot machines. All these mechanics work on a psychological level without requiring direct access to the brain's neural networks. They are effective precisely because they rely on fundamental features of human behavior, evolutionarily ingrained over millions of years of development. Neural interfaces create a fundamentally new paradigm for addiction formation, one that transcends anything we've encountered before. Unlike traditional games, which operate through audio-visual stimuli, neurogames establish a direct dialogue with the brain, bypassing sensory filters. Research from MIT shows that with neural interfaces, dopamine releases are 4 to 6 times more intense than with traditional forms of gaming. This is due to the absence of delay between intention and action. Thought instantly materializes in the virtual environment, creating an unprecedentedly strong feedback loop. Neurophysiologists from the University of California have discovered a unique phenomenon of neural short-circuiting, where the brain forms enhanced synaptic connections specific to the neurogaming experience. These connections are activated even at rest, causing obsessive thoughts about the game and an irresistible desire to return to the virtual world. A particular danger is that neural interfaces can directly stimulate pleasure centers, bypassing natural regulatory mechanisms. While traditional games can cause eye strain, hand fatigue, or spinal discomfort, which naturally limits sessions, neurogames circumvent these protective barriers. Longitudinal studies show that users of neural interfaces develop tolerance to virtual stimuli twice as fast as players with traditional controllers. This leads to an escalation in playtime and intensity, and withdrawal syndrome manifests at the neurochemical level, causing symptoms similar to abstinence syndrome when withdrawing from psychoactive substances. Delving into the world of neurogames, our brain initiates a complex neurochemical symphony. When we control virtual objects with the power of thought, a veritable biochemical explosion occurs in the brain. Research shows that dopamine levels, the neurotransmitter of pleasure, increase by 80% more with neurointerfaces than with traditional games. This is due to the unique feeling of unity between intention and outcome, where there is no gap between desire and action. Serotonin, responsible for feelings of satisfaction, is also produced in increased quantities, creating a euphoric effect comparable to the use of certain psychoactive substances. Neuroscientists at Harvard University have found that prolonged use of neurointerfaces leads to a restructuring of dopamine receptors. The brain, receiving overstimulation, begins to decrease sensitivity to ordinary sources of pleasure. This is a classic mechanism of tolerance formation. Over time, more intense and prolonged immersion in neurogames is required to achieve the same effect. In parallel, sensitivity to endorphins, produced during physical activity or social interaction in the real world, decreases. Withdrawal syndrome upon cessation of neurointerface use manifests at a biochemical level as an imbalance of neurotransmitters. Users report states resembling depression, low mood, apathy, sleep disturbances, and impaired concentration. This is due to a temporary deficit of dopamine and serotonin, to whose elevated levels the brain has adapted. Particularly alarming are studies of neuroplasticity in adolescents using neurointerfaces. The developing brain is especially susceptible to such influences, which can lead to long-term changes in reward and motivation systems. Detecting nascent neurogaming addiction is no easy task, especially when dealing with a fundamentally new technology. However, scientists and clinicians have already identified a number of characteristic signals that warrant attention. Physical markers manifest primarily in changes in sleep patterns. Users with developing addiction report difficulty falling asleep without a prior neurogaming session, headaches upon attempting to abstain from using the interface, and the phenomenon of phantom commands, involuntary mental impulses as if directed at controlling real-world objects, are also characteristic. Psychological indicators include obsessive thoughts about the game during waking hours, a decrease in interest in previously enjoyable activities, and increasing anxiety when unable to use the neurointerface. A particularly alarming sign is cognitive narrowing, a state where thought processes increasingly concentrate around the gaming experience. Social markers appear as progressive isolation. The user prefers virtual communication over real, neglects family and work responsibilities. Modern diagnostics employ a multifactorial approach, including analysis of brain bioelectrical activity, psychological testing, and assessment of behavioral patterns. Specialists have developed a neurogaming engagement scale, where a score of 65 out of 100 possible points is considered borderline. It is important to remember that early detection of the problem significantly increases the chances of successful correction of addictive behavior, while the brain's neuroplasticity still allows for the restoration of healthy patterns. In an age of rapid neurogaming technology development, parents face unprecedented challenges. How can one protect a child from an invisible danger that directly affects their brain? The first and most crucial step is establishing clear time limits. Experts requirements restricting neurointerface sessions to 30 minutes for children under 12 and no more than an hour for teenagers, with mandatory 2-hour breaks between sessions. Create digital-free zones in the home. For instance, the dining room and bedroom. Utilize parental control software specifically designed for neurointerfaces, which not only limits usage time, but also blocks access to games with high addictive potential. Regularly check your child's activity history and pay attention to usage patterns. Equally important is offering engaging alternatives: sports, creative activities, board games, and outdoor pursuits. Research indicates that children with diverse interests are significantly less likely to develop neurogame addiction. A key aspect of prevention is open dialogue. Speak with children about the mechanisms of addiction formation in a language they understand, explaining how neurointerfaces affect the brain. Avoid intimidation, but emphasize the importance of balance between the virtual and real worlds. Lead by example. Children adopt their parents' digital habits. If you yourself spend hours connected to a neurointerface, your admonitions will carry no weight. Develop a family technology agreement with clear rules and consequences for their violation. Remember, a complete ban often leads to the opposite effect: secret usage and a loss of trust. Instead, strive for a conscious, controlled introduction of new technologies to your child under your sensitive guidance. Using gaming neurointerfaces requires the same responsibility from us as driving a car or handling any other powerful technology. The first rule of safe immersion is establishing clear time limits. Specialists recommend adult users to limit continuous sessions to 1.5 hours, with mandatory 1-hour breaks in between. Create a digital reminder timer that will work independently of the neuro interface and signal the need for a pause. The practice of mindfulness becomes an indispensable tool for self-control. Before each gaming session, take a minute to reflect on your goals. Why are you connecting? What experience are you seeking? How much time are you willing to spend? After disconnecting, conduct a short reflection. What do you feel? How strong is the desire to continue? Have you noticed changes in your mood? Keeping a diary of your neurogaming experience helps track the formation of addiction at early stages. Pay special attention to your body's physical signals. Headaches, neck tension, dry eyes, sleep disturbances. All of these can indicate excessive use of the neuro interface. Develop a ritual for transitioning between the virtual and real worlds. After disconnecting from the system, perform a few physical exercises, drink water, talk to loved ones. This helps the brain switch over and reduces the risk of developing the digital echo phenomenon. The future of neurogaming technologies appears simultaneously exciting and alarming. Analysts predict that by 2030, neuro interfaces will be as ubiquitous as smartphones are today. We will see devices with unprecedented accuracy in reading brain activity, capable of interpreting not only basic commands, but also complex emotional states. However, as the technology develops, so too will the associated risks evolve. Neuropsychologists warn of the emergence of new forms of addiction, where virtual reality, perceived directly by the brain, will become indistinguishable from physical reality. In such conditions, the creation of regulatory frameworks becomes critically important. Many countries are already developing legislative initiatives that limit the time of neuro interface use by minors and require manufacturers to implement safety systems. The International Neurotechnology Association, in collaboration with the WHO, is formulating global ethical standards, including mandatory age labeling, restrictions on mechanics exploiting dopamine response, and a ban on subliminal influence on the subconscious. Tech giants are investing in the development of self-limiting systems that monitor the user's neurophysiological indicators and forcibly interrupt a session upon signs of addiction formation. The future of neurogaming lies in the balance between innovation and the protection of mental health. We stand on the threshold of an era when technologies will allow us to explore new facets of human consciousness. But it is important to remember, the most powerful technology is our ability to make conscious choices. Neuro interfaces, like any tool, are neither good nor evil in themselves. Everything depends on how we learn to use them. Our task is to create a culture of responsible interaction with technologies that will protect the vulnerable and unlock the full potential of the human mind.